All right, we turn our attention now to Japan and President Trump's visit to Asia. CBS News chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes is there in Tokyo and can give us some of the other updates. We've been discussing the headlines this hour, Nancy. Good morning to you. Good evening, of course, but, you know, for folks here watching. It's all smiles and handshakes from what we can tell, but what is President Trump specifically walking away with from his meeting with Japan's new prime minister?
Well, he's walking away with a lot of good optics in advance of his sit-down with China's President Xi Jinping later this week in South Korea. He was looking to project strength here, looking to project a close bond with an Asian ally, Japan. So he announced a new military partnership with Japan, sending them missiles for F-35s that are about to arrive within the week, and then new economic partnerships as well, particularly when it comes to rare earth minerals. And that is no accident. This is actually the third Asian country that President Trump has signed such an agreement with since China announced recently that it was going to make it much more difficult for the U.S. and the rest of the world to get access to China's rare earth minerals. And that's a real blow because China controls the processing of more than 90% of the world's rare earth minerals. So this is the president trying to find ways around that Chinese move if he isn't able to cut a deal with China that would cause China to reverse on its own.
And let's speak more about that, because President Trump is expected to meet with Chinese leader Xi Jinping a bit later this week. What strategy is the White House walking into that meeting with, and what does the president want out of it?
Well, we've seen some brinksmanship from both sides over the past few months, just looking to gain leverage in these trade negotiations, which President Trump really kicked off on so-called Liberation Day when he announced that he was going to be jacking up tariff rates on China and on goods from the rest of the world as well. And since then, these two massive economies have been at odds. China making threats like the one surrounding its rare earth minerals, boycotting the purchase of U.S. soybeans, another big blow because China is the biggest purchaser. And then President Trump, in turn, making big threats, saying he's going to impose another 100% tariff on Chinese goods. I asked the former U.S. ambassador to China, Nicholas Burns, who's been watching all of this back and forth in advance of this big meeting between the president and Xi, what the consequences could be, not just for U.S. customers, but for world economies if these two major powers aren't able to work this out. Take a listen to what he had to say.
What's the impact for American consumers if President Trump and President Xi don't strike a trade deal?
Well, continued high tariffs would really be consequential for the global economy. It would grind to a halt most of the trade between China and the U.S.
Now, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and his Chinese counterparts say that they've made a lot of progress towards a deal. They've had a breakthrough, an agreement in principle. But we'll see what President Trump has to say coming out of that meeting with Xi on Thursday, whether they actually have something set in stone or this is just the first step.
Nancy Cordes, thank you for that, joining us from Tokyo.